This episode is brought to you by Web3 Enabler. Check out our app Blockchain Payments on the Salesforce App Exchange. Blockchain Payments brings cryptocurrencies to Salesforce. Hello everyone and welcome to the Real World Blockchain Podcast. And in today's special episode, my guest is Paul Brody from Ernst Young. So Paul, you are the principal and global blockchain leader at Ernst Young. How's it going, Paul?
It's going very well, thank you. I have now survived 2.5 crypto winters, and I still have this job, so can't complain too much.
That's nice. You know, it's you could have little stitches in your wallet just to. Oh, that's the number of winters he survived. All right. So, how did you come into contact with the blockchain industry?
So I actually got into blockchain when I was at IBM, and not through cryptocurrency or payment, but actually through the Internet of Things. One of the things the problem that we were trying, I was the vice president at the time of the electronics industry business unit at IBM. And many of our clients were asking this question, like, isn't it strange? We spend all this money buying these super fancy devices, and every device is becoming intelligent. Washing machines, I've got 3 smart door locks in my house. And here's the strange thing. Many of them they're powered, they're connected to the internet. They have CPUs on them that are very powerful, and still we have to pay for cloud compute infrastructure. And my clients are like, this is crazy. If it costs us 25 or 50 cents, per year to manage one of these devices in the cloud, and I have 1 billion devices, I'm looking at $1 billion of liability every single year to manage these devices. It doesn't make any sense. And so the value proposition was like, can't these devices manage themselves? And so we went down this path of learning about distributed computing, and we learned about Bitcoin. We're like, this is really cool because we could have like computing infrastructure that also is for payments, because then devices could like pay each other in micro payments for like, hey, I used a little bit of your compute power or something like that. And then right as we were getting towards working with Bitcoin, one of my colleagues said, hey, I've met this guy. He wants to do like Bitcoin, but for compute. And his name is Vitalik, and you got to meet him. And we did. And we ended up building our prototype for IBM on the alpha version of Ethereum for Samsung. And we showed it at CES in 2015. And honestly, by then I was like, blockchain is it. This is where I want to make my career. I am going down this path.
And do you have a background as a developer or more as a law background? What's your background?
I have a degree in economics and a certificate in African studies. And my mother was a software developer. My father was a nuclear physicist. So as I always tell people, what that makes me is a huge disappointment. But I love technology. But strangely, I also really like sort of economics and public policy and things like that.
It's interesting because when I asked you this question, I was thinking, okay, but where does he come from? Because your point of view seems like a fine-tuned mix between economics and philosophy, and you don't seem to be technologically illiterate. So I was thinking, where does he come from? Because he seems competent in a wide array of things. Okay, cool. And so what is it that you guys do at Ernst Young regarding blockchain, regarding Web3, the blockchain industry, and so on?
Really three main things. So we have, set aside for just a moment, we have very traditional consulting services. If you come to us and say, we need a strategy, we can do that. If you come to us and say, we're of course an audit firm, so we do things like financial statement audit. I run kind of the global blockchain team, and we've got 3 things on our agenda that are very specific. Number 1, we want to build the tools that make it safe for large enterprises and crypto exchanges and financial entities to hold, manage, and use digital assets safely. So mainly for us. Sorry, go ahead.
Technical tools or legal tools or both?
Software tools. So we have built a tool, for example, called Blockchain Analyzer. And what it does is, let's say you're a crypto exchange and we're your auditor. Crypto exchange says, customer paid me $1,000 to buy Bitcoin for them. And I bought it. And we're like, okay, we want to match all of your customer transactions and all the Bitcoin that you have. We're going to go verify that you really do have that Bitcoin on the public chain and that you made those transactions. So that's what Blockchain Analyzer does. It matches up all of your wallets. It matches up all of your liabilities. so that we can say with confidence, this audit client bought all the stuff that they were supposed to buy, for example. Right. So that's one thing. The other thing is we have a security team in Tel Aviv, and what they do is they do smart contract testing and review. So we can take a smart contract, we can simulate it, we can run a whole gamut of kind of security tests against it, that kind of thing.
All right, and regarding that, can you name this partner, or is it just a sub firm of Ernst and Young?
Part of our team, we have a software-based smart contract analytics tool, and what it allows us to do is to take the contract, run it in simulation, test certain scenarios, like what happens if I give it more than the allowed input and stuff like that. And what we've done is we've trained a team to go through this smart contract testing process. It's what other people call smart contract reviews, but we don't. We don't call it smart contract review or smart contract audit because it's not legally an audit. And everybody who's out there calling them smart contract audits is not a good word to use because audit has a meaning. It implies a level of surety that doesn't really exist. But we can do review and test. So we do a lot of that stuff. That's one bucket of what we do, which is blockchain analytics and security.
Allow me a small question. That's not the main topic, but are you familiar with formal verification?
Yes, such a cool concept and really, really hard to like. I think we have talked about it a lot because I have a whole team of PhD mathematicians. We've had firms come to us over the years and say, hey, we know how to do formal verification, a kind of mathematical proving of all the code that means you could prove that your code is bug free. We have not seen definitive evidence that works yet.
I love it.
But I think it's a really cool concept. By the way, we're talking to a group of French engineers who say that they think they've cracked the code on how to do this. And in a couple of weeks, we're going to have a sit down with them and kind of try to go through it. But I think formal verification is really such a cool idea. And I wish that it worked. Or I wish that it worked at scale. I know it can work in practice and in theory, but I don't know that it works at scale. And I don't know that there's an easy way to do it with automation.
That's lovely. I love it because, being in this field and since we at Moon are also chaperoning a sub firm doing formal verification extensively, I love it when I hear a contradictory statement saying we're not sure that it works yet. And it's interesting because the discipline is not it's not young.
I don't want to say that it doesn't work. What I would like to say is it doesn't work at scale. Like I think you can do it individually, contract by contract, but it's very, very, very hard work. That being said, like if you had it would be very cool if somebody went and did made a formally verified version of an ERC-20 contract. Think about how good that would be, because it would substantially reduce some of the hacking. So I do think, in certain cases, we can use formal verification. What I don't think we can do is what we were hoping for, or what we were thinking about, is some kind of automated tool that takes your junky code and like cleans it up, spits it out as formally verified output that does the same stuff. I don't think we know how to do that at scale. Every formally verified contract is going to be a big piece of work.
Oh, that's fascinating. All right. And so you were talking about businesses, and that's the key point here.
The first thing that we do, yes, basically make it safe for enterprises to use, supporting our audit teams. Second thing we do, we want enterprises to be able to do this stuff for more than payment. So if you think about any kind of business agreement, I got money, you've got stuff, and we're going to exchange my money for your stuff under the terms of an agreement. So right now, a lot of the world of crypto is very, very focused on payments. But in my mind, payment is a very small part of it. That's one part of it. I'm paying. Paying for what, right? And under the terms of what agreement? Almost all business-to-business agreements have rules like you pay a penalty if you pay late, and we get volume discounts and things like that. So what we've been trying to do on the industrial side is build the tools that are required to enable money for stuff under the terms of an agreement. And this is where it gets hard, because money for stuff under an agreement is actually easy with tokens and smart contracts, but not with privacy. So enterprises, if you think about sort of what enterprises buy, how much they pay, where it goes, these are the most sensitive business topics in a corporation. There's no company on earth that I know of that's comfortable letting anybody just like see what they're buying, how much they're paying. So the big push that we have made over the last 8 years at EY is to build zero knowledge proof based systems that allow you to do payments and asset transfers with complex business logic on public Ethereum. No centralization, no kind of like hand waving, true zero knowledge based, fully decentralized, public Ethereum based transactions with business logic protected by privacy.
How wonderful. So that's fascinating on Ethereum. What do you think of so first of all, can you vulgarize what you understand from zero knowledge proof? I'm always interested to see what people think, the way people would sum it up.
You mean what is a zero knowledge proof?
Yeah, for our listeners.
A zero knowledge proof, the way I explain it to other people is basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to prove a statement is true without sharing the underlying data. So let's say that I had two balls and I am and you are colorblind, right? You can't tell the difference between red and green. So I'm going to show you one ball in one hand and one in the other hand, and I'm going to say, listen, these are different colors. I promise you, they really are. And you'd be like, dude, that's not possible. They look exactly the same to me. And I'd say, here, I'll prove it to you. Take these two balls, put them behind your back, and either switch them or don't switch them, and I'll bring it back in front of you. And I will tell you 3 times in a row whether you kept them in the same hand or switched hands for the balls. At the end of that, you know statistically that these two balls clearly are different because I can tell that you switched them even though they're exactly the same shape. But what you also know, you know that they're different colors, but you still don't know what red or green looks like. You just know that they're different. And that is a small example of a zero knowledge proof. You have zero knowledge of the underlying truth, but you do know that what I am saying is true.
I love this example. That's a very didactic one. Thank you. Our listeners will love it. And so, what do you think of old projects that were aiming at this kind of privacy, such as Monero, for example?
So lots of cool projects. Zcash, for example, is a really good example, but they're not designed for enterprise users. And in particular, there's 2 issues. First of all, to be useful for enterprise, you really need to be on public Ethereum. You've got to be in the shared public infrastructure space, and you've got to be able to accept standard tokens, ERC20s, 721s, 1155s. So that one thing that we did was we made Nightfall, which is our Ethereum L2 that we developed. It runs on top of Ethereum. So it runs in terms of an EVM standard environment. Secondly, we made it enterprise only. So to use it, you have to have an enterprise identity SSL certificate. And that's, we really did not want to make this an attractive solution for bad actors. And in particular, we don't want this to be something you can use anonymously. You have to have an enterprise identity certificate to use it. And then thirdly, we built it in such a way that it can also interact with another tool that we created called Starlight, which allows you to take a Solidity smart contract and compile it into a zero knowledge circuit. So you can do this whole process of money for stuff under the terms of an agreement. And it's all designed for enterprises, and it runs in this Ethereum ecosystem. And that's really the big difference. In fact, we've won many patents for this work, but we have put all the output as public domain open source code, so anyone can use it.
Fascinating. So I love where this is going. And do you think that this kind of technology and Web3 in general will be replacing standard banking operations in the future? If yes, why? If no, why not?
So I think it depends on the value proposition. And let me give you an explanation. When EY pays me my monthly salary, it's kind of a one-way transaction. There's not a lot of complex business logic involved, right? Same thing like when you go into a supermarket and you buy a bunch of stuff and you pay with your debit card on the way out. That's a very efficient transaction. And again, there's no complex logic. There's no verification because it was already done in the process, right? You were in the supermarket. the supermarket checkout person scanned your item and then you paid. So I don't think I'm pretty certain that highly centralized systems will always be more efficient than decentralized ones. So then you get to this interesting question, like, why would you use a decentralized one? I think it all turns on what's the most costly part of the transaction. Um, in a centralized system where you paid with your debit card at a supermarket, you actually did the most expensive part, which is that you put the stuff in the grocery bag and you saw that the checkout clerk doing that. In the business to business sense, what happens is I agree that I'm going to pay you things for money. I'm going to pay you money for stuff that you sent me, right? And what happens is the payment is the cheap part. What's really expensive is two things. Number one, you said you sent stuff. Did the warehouse get it? Did they inspect it? Were all the items clear of defects? Right? There's a lot of verification that goes on that's quite expensive. And then when I get the invoice, I got to check, like, so does this invoice comply with the terms of our contract? And typically, a good example is it costs a large company about $100 to do a single purchase order or a single payment. The actual transmission of money is a very small amount. Now, a decentralized system like Ethereum, it is more costly. It will always be more costly to make a payment in a decentralized system, but you save money overall because a smart contract and a set of receipt and the tracking the tokens that you received, that automates all the checking. So the total cost of executing the transaction, including verification, checking you got stuff, making sure the purchase order matched the invoice and all complied with the terms of your agreement, that I can do way cheaper, even if the actual payment costs a little bit more. So I'm looking at the total cost of ownership. And the rule of thumb that we use is that blockchains are good wherever you have complex business logic and multiple parties. Then they are vastly cheaper and more efficient than centralized systems.
Okay, so there's really a strong business logic here. So basically, we're probably not going to see the Bitcoiners' dream of grandmothers paying their coffee in cafes in the real world, but for businesses, this is going to save a lot of costs. So that's for you. That's, if I get you correctly, that's an inevitable step for all the businesses that want to survive in the next decade, right?
Yeah, I personally am very skeptical of the idea. Well, two things. First of all, Bitcoin turns out not to be a great payment system. Bitcoin turns out to be kind of a valuable digital asset that people want to hold. But because it's deflationary, nobody actually wants to spend their Bitcoin, right? So,
Nice.
Even if Bitcoin was good at handling enormous volumes of transactions, people wouldn't want to do so. They want to spend their fiat currency. That's what they're used to. In a sense, what people who created Bitcoin failed to take into account is that there's money that we keep for investments and there's money that we use for day-to-day spending. And for day-to-day spending, we want fiat currency. Fiat currency works really well. Payment systems are really well evolved. For investment, in the same way that you don't spend your Bitcoin, you also don't walk into a Starbucks and be like, hey, can I pay you with a share of Starbucks? Like, people don't want to do that either. They want to transact in their fiat currency. And so these are fundamentally separate things. And fiat currency, even, I think we have very, very efficient centralized fiat currency payment systems especially for consumers and what I'll call simplified one-way payments.
Okay, that's wonderful. And so, how do you think businesses should prepare for the next step?
So one of the examples I use a lot when I talk about kind of large-scale, long-term adoption is the example from e-commerce. Right. Go back. You got to see my gray hair. Go back a long time ago when I was starting out my career in the late 90s. We were just getting down into the mechanics of e-commerce. And we quickly reached the point where it was theoretically very simple to do an online purchase, right? It's funny when I can go back in Amazon, I can see like buying books in the mid 90s, right? Almost the day Amazon opened, I think I bought a couple books. But so many obstacles existed in order to make this kind of go at scale, right? So, for example, very few products had online catalogs. Very few products had online pictures. You could make online ordering, but ironically, it was actually easier to order like a pallet of toilet paper than an individual package, because online ordering, to the extent that they existed back then, was mostly for store managers to replenish their stores. And the whole package distribution system was made for store deliveries and not many home deliveries. So it took a long time to work out this kinks. And what you got was, every time you crossed one obstacle, you came across another that sort of had to be solved. And what you ended up in e-commerce was 20 years of mainstream adoption. In every case, like every few years, we would sort of be able to add a new category of cheaper, more valuable. Like we started with high value, low weight, and we ended up now, eventually at the point where you can ship, dog food, right? So it's a long-term cycle that involves knocking down lots of obstacles. In the world of blockchain, we have a similar thing. Companies have lots of digital data, but they don't really understand tokenization, for example. And even if they did, they don't necessarily have a digital wallet. SAP has just finished developing a crypto and digital wallet that can be attached to S4 HANA, right, or R3. So all of these pieces have to come together, right, and the technology has to mature for adoption. So it's going to be, my own prediction is the whole cycle of adoption is going to be about 20 years, and individual firms are going to discover as they get into this that they've got 3 of the 4 necessary ingredients or something like that, and they need to solve it. Every time you get in or you get more complex, you're going to discover a new problem that needs to be solved.
Speaking of the SAP solution, did you test it yourself? Have you seen it with your own eyes?
No, we've been talking with SAP. We know that there's quite a few companies. SAP has done a ton of experimenting. They're a great example, right? They've done a ton of experimenting with crypto and blockchain. They've had like a half a dozen different solutions that they have tried out in different ways. So, we're still a little bit in that experimentation phase where larger companies are testing things out. Like I think SAP has tried, for example, a carbon traceability program. They've tried a couple of other things, mostly on sort of proprietary or private chains or things like Hyperledger. But I'm hopeful that in the end, everybody will sort of start to converge towards standard tokenization models in the public Ethereum ecosystem.
Wonderful. And so, how do you think this would help, or maybe not? I don't know, but I definitely think this would help businesses in many countries facing a huge banking nightmare, inflationist nightmares. For example, cryptocurrencies are very great when you are in Somalia willing to pay a guy in Malaysia and having a safe delivery, and you cannot be paid in USD. So how do you think Web3 is going to change the face of the world in terms of international e-commerce?
So let's separate the consumer from the business side. So on the consumer side, it's very interesting. Governments can't, it's not practical for, in many cases, right? Take your country, right? Making a payment using crypto to somebody in another country using a crypto network, in many cases, it's not technically legal. But governments do not have the resources or the capacity to go and prosecute every individual person who violates the foreign exchange laws. They do have the resources and capacity to prosecute banks or large companies that do. So what consumers can do on a peer-to-peer basis is quite different than what businesses are able to do in general. So you do have to be a little bit careful about that in how you think about this. One thing that is notable is over on the consumer side is that the existence of Bitcoin, the existence of cryptocurrency has a little bit like the existence of holding US dollars in cash. It has provided a bit of a hedge and something of a backstop for consumers in countries that are experiencing very, very high levels of inflation. When I say very high, I'm not talking about the 5 or 6% in
4,000%.
I'm talking about 100, 200, 500% kind of inflation, the kind that really does kind of destroy things. And as an economist, I can tell you, like, inflation between like 2 and 10%, honestly, really is not, the fuss over inflation in the US and Europe isn't warranted. There's actually a lot of evidence that suggests that, pay and prices adapt kind of in tandem. And US is a good example. On average, most people are slightly better off even after you include inflation. That's not true if inflation is running at 100 or 200%. That starts to really eat away at the fabric of your country. And, in those cases, having crypto or US dollars stashed underneath your mattress is really important, right? I think, one of the lessons in the world and one of the lessons from the last few years in countries with high inflation is, the truth be told, what people really want are US dollars. That's overwhelmingly what they want. Stable coins, US dollars. They want that, even in countries where Bitcoin is legal tender, people prefer to have US dollars if it's a legal option, because it's sort of more easily spendable, right? And particularly people in low income countries, not all of them have investment money. They just have day-to-day spending money, and they would just like it not to be worthless tomorrow, right? So what consumers can do is different from enterprises. Over on the enterprise side, I think there's a fundamental opportunity in the enterprise space that's really important, which is enterprises that want to transact in digital ecosystems are nervous about how these digital ecosystems tend to turn out. The truth is, we are living in the golden age of digital monopolies. Every two-sided marketplace, buyers and sellers, that's connected to a digital hub is a natural monopoly. And we see this happening over and over again, right? Where what happens is at the early stages, this digital ecosystem that connects buyers and sellers, it's centralized. It does a great job of creating a marketplace, building infrastructure, improving the flow that's very specific to something like retail or renting a car or borrowing somebody's home, right? They've built amazing tools that are highly specialized. But eventually, because of network effects, you end up as a de facto monopoly, right? And then what happens is the business switches from helpfully connecting buyers and sellers to figuring out how to extract a disproportionate share of the value from the ecosystem. And in the same way that crypto systems are censorship resistant, they are also monopoly resistant. If you and I are transacting on a public network with standardized tokens, we really can't be locked into a single provider. And the analogy I would make is this. Think about private messaging systems that exist today on the internet, right? Where they have the power to hold you captive, they could charge you money, or they could change the terms and conditions, versus email. Email is amazing, right? When was the last time you paid for email, right? Email is standard messaging format delivered over the public internet in a decentralized infrastructure. I, for one, it's incredible. Email is an amazing example of what happens when you have standardization on decentralized networks. And I want e-commerce to be as ridiculously cheap, simple, and standard as email for businesses. And that's what we can do with public blockchains. And that the result of that, it's not just going to be a cheaper ecosystem. I also think it's going to be a fairer one, because in that ecosystem, the companies that make the products and services and the consumers that buy them, any value that's created by digitization goes to the participants in the ecosystem, not the central digital monopoly facilitating the network.
I love it because it shows another path, because the depressing vision of many cryptocurrency enthusiasts or Web3 enthusiasts these days is that you either have to choose between a very borderline illegal cypherpunk old school scenario, or something where it's only about ETFs owned by big corporations and very standardized CBDCs, so cryptocurrencies issued by governments with little to no privacy, but also little to no freedom of change and freedom of use. So I really like the fact that you guys are proposing a coherent vision for businesses and ultimately for individuals in the long run. So thank you for that.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's as you can tell, it's my passion project, right? I knew from almost 11 years ago, I'm like, this is what I'm doing, right? And this is what I'm doing. And starting about 8 years ago, when I really sort of started to peel back the onion, I realized, and I know I know not only what I'm doing, but I know what my contribution is going to be. I know what I'm going to be able to look back and say, I made this happen. And it's privacy on public blockchains. That is my mission for businesses. I'm here to make it happen.
Thank you so much, Paul. Any last word?
Um, I'm the chairman of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, so I'd love for people to join the EEA. We're kind of just an industry group. We do standards, we have meetups. So please come join the EEA. And then secondly, I wrote a book. It's called Ethereum for Business. It's available at all the places that you buy a book, both in print and electronically. And there's even an audiobook. So please join the EEA. Please read the book. Please tokenize your business and put it on Ethereum.
Dear listeners, please look it up. Thank you so much, Paul. Everyone, this was Real World Blockchain, the podcast where we can learn how businesses can thrive in the next decade, thanks to cryptocurrencies, Web3, and the blockchain. And today we learned quite a lot about that. This was Paul Brody, Principal and Global Blockchain Leader at Ernst Young or EY. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thanks for having me.